no idea what that means.
Especially when he's a bus driver.
Mark, I think it's going to be between you and Carol if Carol joins us to run through the agenda. Does everyone have the agenda? I think I resent it.
I've got it.
And all you have to do is walk through the points to make it official, and we can.
Yeah, just give me a second here.
Yeah. That's not even 1 o'clock. So we're still waiting on Greg, Leanne. Though Leanne rolls off the foundation board. We have to keep that in mind. So does Len for that matter.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. All right. But you're going to stay on as like a community.
Yeah. So I told Charlotte I was, willing to accept the advisory board thing, and I'd like to be included on the Waynesboro subcommittee for the foundation.
Yeah.
I don't know what that process is going to be. I don't know if they've defined it yet, but when we get to that point, I'd like to be a part of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi, Faye. Hi, Greg.
Good afternoon.
Oh, actually, now that I think about it, Leanne did say she could not make it. And who are we missing? Carol.
Girl, yeah. How's everybody?
Good.
Great.
We should be outside.
Nice. Very nice. Actually. Yeah. So did everybody vote non-committed today? All right. I know we all voted for Trump. I got it.
I haven't voted yet. I'm elected.
I'm just being funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Haha.
It's the system of primaries is a very interesting thing to me where, people can get the, when the nomination was so few votes from their party, like North Dakota.
Yeah, this primary is
100 votes. Come on.
this primary is not a primary.
No.
It's
No.
a coronation.
Yeah.
It really is. We're not getting a choice.
I don't mean to dampen the discussion, just so you know that this is a streamed.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anything, untoward was said, but just want to make sure we don't get too comfortable.
Yeah.
So are we able to get comments? Maybe we can get some feedback. All right, but never mind. I'll stay off the topic.
I think you're on the boards of many other nonprofits, and they would much rather be in the middle of all that, Len.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely.
All right. Do you want me to kick it off then, Joe?
Yes, please.
All right. Well, welcome everybody in Tom's absence. As we don't know where he is exactly, but in Tom's absence, welcome to the Waynesboro Advocacy meeting of 5 March 2024. And we can start off the festivities by looking to get a motion to approve the minutes from our February 6th meeting. And if we can grab somebody to make that.
I'll do it.
Thank you, Maggie. And a second.
I'll second it.
All right,
Second.
thank you very much, Len. All right, so the minutes from February 6th are approved, and we can move on to the meat of the discussion today and begin with an update on all the activities. And I presume that moves to you, Joseph.
Yeah, I'll quarterback it out from here. The one thing that's still ongoing is we have a couple of meetings scheduled, I think beginning next week, if I'm not mistaken, for the fish working group. So we're going to continue to derive some material while we have some momentum, specifically towards fish, the South River, their ecology, and so forth. Just to refresh memories, we of course have gotten the approval to move to preliminaries. So that concludes schematic design. We'll move into preliminaries. We just don't have the money to do it. So under Part B of Section 2, follow up on funding request, specifically what that is we've been trying to ascertain what the prospect of getting the rest of our detailed design money looks like. And I think Jonathan's got the best handle on the complexities of the funding of planning versus construction in the Commonwealth. And we'll probably mention this a couple of three times, but just keep in mind that we're not the only agency in this situation. There are other agencies that are in the middle of detailed design and have kind of hit a pause because of what Jonathan's going to describe. So it's all you.
Sure. So we can take it back a few years, fiscal year 21, fiscal year 22. I very well recall they pulled roughly $500 million out of construction funding for fiscal year 21, and I think 726 off the top of my head, $726 million off of fiscal year 22 for further construction projects. So as you might imagine, that created quite a delay in the system. So what we're running into now is, that this is just how they do business. As funding goes forward for a museum, a library, a school, a college, general funds move forward, they move into construction funding. That is also broken up into several different segments, with, upfront funding for working drawings, and then you get into the first part of construction, and then you get into FF&E, and then you get into the closeout. So what, just as business as usual for Department of Planning and Budget, they take, as projects move, kind of cross that line into construction funding, either through VPPA bond or through just general funding. They take those funds that are allocated for the tail end of those projects and refund detailed planning. So right now we're in that bubble of, we stopped all construction in the state of Virginia. So now we are waiting for it to crank back up, and the new projects moving forward into construction haven't done it yet. This is something we should see July 1st. So if projects move forward, I know there's several things up in the air and probably will be until July 1st. I don't think general funds, I don't think we're in any kind of shape to not come to work July 2nd. Right. But I think capital projects with the $2 billion plus for the construction of the sports arena, other Northern Virginia projects, I think we are in direct competition with those items. So that the funding is waiting on new capital, whether we're in the capital pool or not, we're still waiting on any project to move forward into that capital pool.
Does that make sense?
Not really, but again, I look at it from being in private industry, where either the money's there and you spend it, or it isn't and you don't, or you borrow it. But needless to just leave that aside for a second. So we've been approved to go into preliminary design, right? So that's the internal exhibit architecture. Okay, has the money been allocated for that? Was that second tranche of funding? Has that been transferred? Is that caught up in some of this?
So that money is not there. So that would be what we're borrowing in the private sector. We'd be borrowing from a construction project to pay for that.
So I guess so as I understand it, the way the state's been doing this basically has been approving projects, but essentially funding them in arrears, right? You're waiting for the next funding budget approval to fund what's already been pre-approved, right?
So Len, one thing that might help is I asked Ryan to dig back into history about how this building we're in right now was funded. And so Ryan, could you just walk through that timeline real quick as far as approvals and when monies were available and so forth?
Sure. So really big picture, pre-planning was completed for this building in 1993. And then detailed design completion happened in 2000. So based on that, we're still ahead of the game.
7 years.
Yeah. So, we early 2020 for Waynesboro, estimating if money's available in September, we're looking at a May 2025 completion. So,
yeah.
That's the frame of reference. But.
Yeah. I guess the thing that's hard for me, just for my own, cognitive abilities to really grasp is the fact that there was a previous budget that was approved for $1.4 million, whatever that number was, that was going to fund the the budget or the design, the detailed design that covered both the architectural building design, the physical stuff, which we've completed and funded, and the inside, the internal piece of that, which we've been approved, right? But the funding's not there. So the bucket that, whatever pot of money that was originally conceived to be funding that is no longer there. So we're waiting for the next pot to get created and filled so that we can pull from that. I mean, that's kind of how a simplistic way for me to see this, but that's the struggle. I understand the whole construction issue, right? I know that the state is, got priorities and there's new projects and there's priorities that the governor has versus the General Assembly and they're debating and all that. I get all that future stuff, basically, even though we're approved and queued. But what I have a difficulty, really quite conceiving is, if we've already been approved the money, why haven't we gotten that funds just to at least complete that piece of it? That's the second half of the design, right?
Yes.
Wasn't there an error? Excuse me for interrupting, but wasn't there an error made 2 years ago in the budget process somehow? Because I thought we were fully funded for all the design work.
The only error I know of was the DEB gave us the wrong square footage when they released the project to, no, we got fully funded for the schematics.
Yeah, so we have, well, for the detail design.
So, yeah.
So, we have legislation that shows that we are approved for $1.14 million. So
Right.
there's a bucket that is $1.14 million large, but has never been filled to the top yet.
That's what I recall. There was a chunk
Yes.
omitted for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I don't really understand the reasons. We had the head of DPB talk to us and just said, basically told us to be cool and sit and wait. So yeah, I get you. So right now we have about $80,000 to do about $500,000 worth of work. Right, so
Yeah,
the numbers just don't add up.
All right, so there's no visibility as to when those actual funds are going to end up in the pot that we can then execute on that contract. Is that correct?
That's right. Now, our best understanding, and we reserve the right to edit this based upon what we're given, is that if all goes well, the state will restart projects in the new fiscal year, which will then free up some of that funding needed to fill up our bucket, which is, about $400 and some thousand short.
Okay.
So
So
that's
there's a
July 1st. July 1st is what we're looking at for that.
Yeah, but I've learned my lesson, Faye. I mean, just because it's on the calendar for July 1st, we don't know when someone actually says, oh, here's the transfer, you're good to go.
It was on the calendar for July 1st, 2023.
Sure.
But yeah, so it's difficult to quite grasp that, it's hard, but
You're telling
so
me.
anyways, it just doesn't make sense.
So in the private sector, they're not, so they literally approved more projects than they had money for, which would never happen in the private sector without going out on a capital raise. Like you go angel investors, you go to the stock market, you go to a bank, but they say, well, in 2 or 3 years, we'll probably issue another bond. So we're going to approve more projects than we have money for and move forward because this has consistently been our, it's just how they do business.
Which leads
Is that a function of the General Assembly or is that a function of the paid staff? Just trying to get a handle on it. I don't know if it matters, honestly, but
General Assembly approves projects, the Department of Planning and Budget, DEB, they work together to find the funding.
they try to figure out how to fund it, basically. Essentially, right?
that's
So
our understanding.
yeah, okay. So looking forward, we're wrapped up with all the other construction projects, including the sports complex, which all makes great sense. And they're bickering over that. And the only option or the only saving grace we might have this legislative cycle is if the state approves a bond issue to fund those projects, right?
which I was going to ask Greg if he had heard anything new about, anything regarding bond issuance. Greg?
Yeah, we have not heard anything new about that. So
Okay.
I imagine everyone's focused on getting a budget done by Saturday,
Right.
so that hasn't come up.
Okay, well. So we got a trailer, we got volunteers.
The site.
Yeah,
We got a site, we got a sign, so, okay, I mean, you can only do what you can do. I get it. I mean, you guys are not in control of this and, it's just, trying to get a handle on it. And we just gotta wait.
So I have a question, Joe. When you all went to Richmond a couple weeks ago,
yes.
what was your overall read on responses from legislators, or did you meet mainly with aides? How'd it go, in other words?
Yeah, so and I was actually rereading the agenda, Mark, if it's okay with you, I would actually like to move point 4 before point 3. It just, is contiguous. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, everything was fine. There was nothing really to, no one was going out on a limb to say anything very specific, right? When, we spoke with them. The Senator Head, I didn't meet with him personally. I think it was Tom, did say something, about, we need to be patient, we're not sure what things are gonna look like. I think by that point, he'd already seen the writing on the wall with the halt of, capital projects, right? So, he and Delegate Campbell are still, very supportive. And I think as we talked about, at the last meeting, I believe it was the last meeting, that, they worked with the city's lobbyists to, put forth, 3 separate, requests, one from general funds, one from general funds in language only, and then, for the bond issuance. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a non-answer for you.
Just curious.
Yeah, now, since we're on the topic, and, Greg, I hope it's okay that I'm kind of broaching this, but, apparently, and actually, let me step back to frame this. I think since we're in the position that we're in, and, Len and I are gonna talk about some of our community interactions upcoming. I think we need to talk about messaging here at this meeting. What do we want to say to our,
Community.
supporters, to the
Yeah.
community and so
Yeah.
forth. So again, what we heard, for whatever it's worth, is that, apparently a city council person was having conversation with an elected official. Don't know who the elected official was, but the elected official said something about there is concern for the return on investment of a project like ours.
Oh, for God's sakes, are you kidding me?
Exactly.
How did that,
Unbelievable.
where did you get that from? Where did that feedback from?
Well, I got it secondhand from, Mr. Hitchin.
Oh, no. So we had a city councilman go to Richmond for something, not museum related, and then, so this is second and third hand at this point, but the first hand, I believe, came back and mentioned that they didn't like the bad word, concerns about the ROI. No one has ever heard that anywhere else from anybody. So I would take that all with a grain of salt. Pretend we don't know whether it was an elected official or an aide or someone who in the bathroom. I don't know. So we just need to be aware that it might be out there somewhere, but out of the hundreds of people we've talked to, we've never heard that before.
Yeah.
So let me understand this. So the elected official, somebody in Richmond in the General Assembly has the concern about the ROI, not our city councilman. The city council person heard it from, okay.
Right.
All right. So, okay, we got two new legislators. I'm sure it's not the one, it's probably the other. And that kind of fits in a little bit with, I think, the tenor of a conversation that Tom had with our senator there. So, not too surprised about that, but, you know, I don't think at this point, let me ask this question, and maybe Greg, or I don't know who can answer this, but at this point, it's legislation, right? In order for this to go away, what would be the recourse? One, they could never fund it, right? Could always sit in the queue and never be funded. Two, they could reverse the legislation, but that would take an act of General Assembly to do that, correct? I mean,
Correct.
is that the only two possibilities, right?
I don't think that they can just, I mean, there is black and white legislation that the General Assembly is obligated to put $1.4 million into that bucket that we talked about before.
Yeah.
Of which we come up short. So I don't think it's feasible to just let it sit and then quote unquote go away. Right? I think that also requires, that's the same thing. It's going to require an act of the General Assembly,
Yeah.
which
So,
I don't foresee coming.
I mean, realistically, the horse has left the barn, right? The project's been approved. There's been over $1.5 million spent on it by the state, right? It's been talked up and discussed and all that kind of stuff. So, really, realistically, you can have a concern about ROI, but I don't know that you could get very far with that concern at this stage of the game, right? I think, Joe, where you're at is more appropriate in that, perception's reality issue.
Right.
It's going to be messaging and what we, present and how we continue to discuss it. I do believe, this is my opinion, when we produced that last document, Greg, that was the updated executive summary, I thought we were too conservative on the ROI number there. I think it's a very conservative number. And I think that we've even got more, I think more, actual data that could point to the fact that it was conservative in terms of visitation and that sort of stuff. I think we were trying to be conservative and make it look break even or even a little bit of an investment. But I think that, it really could look at, I think we could stand to pump it up a little bit, or maybe give a worst case, best case, average kind of case, scenario on.
Yeah, I think that gets back to my question of messaging.
Yeah.
Not just about who we talk to or what we say to people in the community, but also how we kind of push things forward. And I will even go one step farther. And I admit I'm going a little bit out on a limb a little bit here, right? We've been very polite about everything, and we have now. You might remember back in the day when all this came up about we're not going to get the full funding. We said, hey, just don't forget, we have to deal with DPB and DEB and all. We have to deal with them every day, just with the general budget here at the museum. So let's be careful about what we say to whom. Everyone's doing the best they can. And that might still be true. Everyone's doing the best they can, but we're not exactly being a squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
That would have to come from the board.
From a concern, I think from a messaging standpoint, and this is something that we kind of went through with the Fly Fishing Festival in the early days. There was not a lot of support for that locally here. We had to kind of prove it to everybody that this thing, and even then there was some complaining until it went away. And then all the businesses were complaining about the fact that all that went away. So I think the key thing for us is that we need to not emphasize that it's an amenity, it's a museum quality of life amenity, as much as we should emphasize the fact that it's a building block or a foundational project that will help our community develop future industries by engaging our students, our STEM education students, with the opportunity to get to learn this at an earlier stage. I think we talk more about that part of it and less about the whole general museum thing. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and I'll just tell everybody here in this call, what I recited to Joe, 2 weekends ago, Mary and I went down to the museum to deliver a basket for the silent auction. I hope that went well, Joe, by the way.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, we're still waiting on the final numbers. We're going to get everyone an idea of their contribution.
Good. So we brought our 6-year-old great niece with us, and we literally had to drag her out of there. She was not ready to leave after several hours. But what was very interesting is we were back there at at the mammal exhibit, and she started playing like she worked at the museum, and she was explaining to Mary what the exhibit meant. So I said, well, why don't I gave her my badge, and I said, we'll make you a curator. You're now a curator at the museum. She spent the rest of the morning or the rest of the day of her visit going around telling Mary about all the stuff that was there, right? So to me, it was, it was kind of one of those light bulb moments in the sense that, maybe we sparked some interest there that might have, will probably have some lifelong impact, right? That's the kind of stuff I think we got, when we talk about return on investment, we got to talk about those kinds of things, bringing in, the tourism aspects of it, but also the educational component and, engaging our local community into STEM futures, and this is going to sound really cruel, and Maggie, don't take offense as an ex-school official, but, we've been growing agricultural people in this, our base has been agricultural, and we've been training our students to work at a factory because that's what the workforce requirements were at the time. If we want to attract the kind of businesses that Greg attracted with the Norfolk Grumman thing, we got to have a workforce that's capable and interested in doing stuff like that. That's the stuff I think we've got to talk about.
No, let's just go clean the face.
That's my, it's not real crystal in what I'm saying, but I think, the return on investment from that standpoint, just the visitation numbers alone, the tourism numbers, all you got to do is take the numbers off the tunnel visitation. And, to me, those are real numbers. It's going to translate right to the museum. And then at the same time, we got the South River Preserve that's coming online. We've got the Sunset Park coming online. I mean, all that stuff is going to generate, tremendous activity in our business community, which we address, but I think we could be more aggressive with the numbers.
I think this is the only time we've heard this. And I think everyone that I've talked to is that the money is tight this year because we're kind of in the space between lots of free federal money and reality. And so revenues are up and all that other good stuff. We got to start paying for stuff on our own. And people are just being cautious. I mean, I don't like it, but that's what I'm hearing. So.
Well, I do know. Yeah, I do know that Representative, Runyon was questioning the value of museums. I do know that, these kind of facilities. And I know that people have addressed it with him, and I felt like he felt satisfied with it. But, it's conservatives, especially business people, and Senator Head is a business person. And when you're trying to make payroll, return on investment's a big deal. You don't invest money unless you got it coming back, and that you got to put it in very specific terms for people like that. That's how they look at things.
I'll underscore what Greg said regarding the tight budget. Well, it's not just a tight budget. It is, the governor has the right to do this. He wanted to focus on things other than new construction. Unfortunately, we are under that umbrella. And as I mentioned before, it's not just our project. So it was a bunch of projects that basically have hit a delay because of this. There's not a precedent to this, Jonathan, that we're aware of.
No, none that we're aware of. And then, of course, our construction manager, he works at JMU. So, all the educational institutions have their foundations that are helping them through this process. So.
Yeah, but private equity guys, for a private equity person, R&D is a four-letter word. They don't want to hear that. They don't look at things. They don't see this kind of long-term view. So it's not surprising to me that the governor's approach is to not have new build, right? There's always better and different ways to reuse what you already have, kind of stuff. I think we need to understand that and frame our messaging in a way that addresses that objection, the general gut feeling and that kind of thinking that they are reluctant to make those type of investments just on the basis of, you know, of how they have their business models, you know?
So Joe, when you asked the question, were you trying to think of how we communicate no money again to our donor base? Your donor base?
Yes, I think, so we have basically two messages. So the ship has sailed for the General Assembly. They're trying to finish out this budget. We will have to, maybe review our message for General Assembly support upcoming. That is, we start again for next year as well as the new biennium in 2 years. But more immediately, we need to speak with, again, future and current supporters. So this is already on your agenda, but next week, Len and I, and Len, we need to kind of look over our slides and
Yeah,
update.
yeah, definitely, yeah.
We have the Daughters of the American Revolution next Thursday, the 14th. I was just recently invited, I didn't know this existed, but to the round table of Waynesboro.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will be meeting with them that same evening. And
I
so,
think you and I presented to them many years ago,
okay,
early in the process. And Greg, who is in that round table group now?
Rick Kane is.
Yeah,
Okay,
Rick Kane, Dr. Castle,
good.
David Galden.
Okay.
Those
Those
are
are all
those ones when I presented a year ago, that's who I sat with. That's who I remember. But
okay. All right.
yeah, it's a generally favorable organization for what we're trying to do.
Well, the last time we were in front of the group, and I think Joe, I think you were with us. I know Irby was there. Um, they were very much, it was a different group, and anything that had to do with state funding was a bad thing because it was
Right.
just never a good thing, But I think this group that you just cited are very supportive. So that's good.
Okay, so I mean, I can tinker and come up. I mean, I've got some ideas as to how we approach this, but I don't want to I'm not going to deceive people, but on the other hand, I just don't want to go with it as a gloom and doom kind of thing either.
I'll tell you what, Joe, I'll tell you what I consistently say, and I've said it as recently as last week, is what John Avoli said to me when we were when we raised the sign a couple of years ago, and that was, it's not a matter of if now, it's a matter of when.
Yep.
And the matter of when is basically determined on, the variables that impact state funding, and I think that's the best way to say it. I said, it's it's driven by the economy, it's driven by the politics, it's driven by who's in the assembly at the time. It'll get there eventually, but we just gotta keep focused on it. I think that's a solid message,
Yeah, and it's not us. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
capital projects as a whole. So no one's picking on us. It's
Right.
just the general classification of things at the state level.
yeah. I think that's a positive way of saying, that it is approved and it's gonna happen. We're just, subject to whatever the current political winds and economic winds are blowing.
That parallels very much what I'm thinking. Len, you like to use the term call to action.
Yeah.
That's one thing I'm struggling with. I mean, we can say the same thing, keep in touch with the legislature, keep encouraging Campbell and Head, et cetera. I thought it was awesome that the Chamber of Commerce wrote a letter of support to the governor,
Yeah.
so we can continue that same message. But kind of going back to what I was saying before, we've been very polite about things over the last decade. And I'm not saying be impolite, but should we be a little more pushy?
I think we need to be direct. I think, the call to action is, we need to do this and then list the outcomes, right? And the outcomes are, we got a nice building that looks great down at that spice that fits in well with the South River Preserve. The outcomes are, it initiates, investment by local businesses. We already know that there's some businesses waiting to do that. It takes the lead, creates a leadership position in private investment for that community. It will really elevate Waynesboro's attraction to tourism, potential tourism, and fits incredibly well. It's just another component of a master strategy of outdoor related natural resource type of tourism that fits in with the other parks that we've talked about in the South River and so forth. But it's all got to be outcome driven, right? It's going to drive more outside investment from tourists or outside investors or new businesses. It's going to enhance our educational delivery of focusing more on the STEM futures, STEM education. It does attract other companies because of the quality of life question. Companies like Northrop Grumman look at those things. Their employees look at those things. And I think it needs to be a simple message and very direct.
So Joe, I think from a squeaky wheel perspective, in sort of feeding off what Len said, I think as long as it continues to be this positive message, I think you can be as squeaky as you want to be as long as it's positive.
Awesome. Yeah.
Right. And everything we have, everything we're talking about here, in our messaging has been very positive towards, the community as a whole. And so I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be more squeaky. Is there any indication or have we seen any other people making noise that are not getting funding? I mean, I noticed when I looked at these amendments and I realized they're in different buckets, but I looked at like the list of amendments that Head had put forward, and there was a lot of money in there for like places like the Frontier Museum. So, I mean, it's not like there's others out there that probably aren't making a little noise. I think is positive noise is good noise.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, well, I mean, I agree with that, and I from that standpoint, I think we have been very direct and enthusiastic, and I hold up the meeting that we had with the governor's staff.
Yeah.
We didn't back down at all. Tom and Greg, myself, city manager, et cetera, the mayor got asked some pretty direct questions, and we had answers for them. So this is simply just playing devil's advocate. Please don't take me seriously here. But I think it would help me think of a direct, squeaky message, so to speak, without crossing any lines. But let's say I'm the governor of Virginia, or let's say I'm a Richmond legislator, a Nova, or a far Southwest Virginia legislator, a Tidewater legislator, and Waynesboro says, you guys better give us money because of A, B, and C, or, we've got all these great arguments. And they say, yeah, and then eventually ignore it. What's Waynesboro going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Nothing, right? No, let's face it, right? We have no leverage.
Right, we have no leverage.
So we have to keep that in mind with the messaging. I'm not saying hit anyone over the head with our stuff, but it's something that's always been in the back of my mind. There's no consequence.
So
in a natural history museum or a city like Waynesboro.
Yeah. So in a sales campaign, competing with another competitor in the commercial world, one of the techniques we used at one of the companies I worked for was, we looked at our product, our machine, it was a computer device versus the competitor, and we identified where our weaknesses were, what the potential objections would have been when we presented to a customer. And we eliminated those objections right up front, right? So that's what we got to understand from those person's perspective. What would be their objections and how do we eliminate them right up front? So if it's return on investment right up front. And the thing that keeps running around in my brain is, if a legislator says, why should I support this project? I live in Tidewater. I have, transportation challenges and I've got all this other stuff. I don't really, Waynesboro, it's just a really small community in the middle of the valley that really has, why should I support that? So the response that keeps rolling in my mind is because it's right for the state. It's a project that's right for the state. It's already, to make the most out of the investment that's already been made. But it's also in a location where, every spring and fall, there's this migration that goes from the north to the south and the south back to the north. We're right on the interstate. We're right at, we're right at a place where the state of Virginia has an opportunity to capture out-of-state tourism, potential, to come here and spend their money in Virginia. It's the right project for Virginia because, those things, we allow ourselves to capture a higher percentage of these people flowing through, people with disposable income. It's the right project for the city of Waynesboro for all the stuff we've said earlier about STEM education and that sort of stuff. That's what we got to say. It's not an expense. It's not an amenity. It's an investment, and it's an investment that pays because it will be unique and attractive to people not that live in Virginia so much, but people from outside of Virginia. And it's accessible.
I hear you loud and clear, Lynn. I do. I hope it's enough,
Well, I'm not sure it is. I think we got to keep working on those objections.
I think your point's really a good one, the fact that it's good for the entire state. And also, I've been thinking all along how we need to be branching out regionally in terms of we've already done some of that, but it's not just Waynesboro and Augusta that are benefiting from this project. There's a, regional benefit in terms of the STEM education. And, I think, maybe there's more we can do along those lines and not just depend on our local legislators, but broaden that, and in terms of our outreach to legislative support.
So are you saying something similar to, like say, Christy had tons of programs. I'm sure she's had tons of programs that have worked within the Tidewater area, right? With some Tidewater schools. So bringing those stories up and condensing them into a few bullets to say, yes, you do get benefit from it. Here's a specific example where Tidewater benefited from the Virginia Museum of Natural History. And it will benefit more as it goes along and as this new campus is put together.
Well, we did some meetings up in presentations up in Northern Virginia. It's been several years now. We need to go back and keep cultivating that. I think the key thing is to get the citizenry to continue to hammer the elected officials with their support for the project. And I think if they start hearing it from the Northern Virginia community and the Richmond metropolitan area community, other parts of the state, that helps with that is, that they just got to keep hearing about it. That's how you get the squeaky wheel thing going. And be more direct about it too, just keep it in their face. We got to crowd share it or we got to bum rush them like they're doing on the border, right? Just get as many numbers or as much numbers as we can.
All right, so I think the timing's good because Len and I are going to work collaboratively on the one group and whatnot. So
that's a good group for us to maybe prototype something.
There you go. Yeah.
A
All right.
message.
Well, I think that's a good actionable first step that we can knock out by next week.
See how it sets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Joe, how do we recap this in some form that says, okay, just on a timeline basis, when would we expect, what are some of the state timelines that are remaining that can give us hope or it will give us answers on pending items?
Mark, I think the obvious thing is the upcoming conclusion of the budget, right? So that's scheduled for Saturday. I hope so.
So that means on Saturday, we'll know what budget amendments have been accepted?
Maybe. Right. We should, right? It's scheduled, but it is politics.
Right. So all you're saying is they would have to extend that date
Correct. You'd know whether or not it was official or if they were extending for another short session.
All right.
And I hope too that it would also lend some clue as to budget, bond issuance or non-bond, not a bond issuance, and if a bond issuance, how much?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, I think that gets to I think at the end of the budget process, they've got all these projects left over. Now what do we do? And that's when they talk about a bond. When the state can borrow, if I remember right, $1 billion this year and another $1 billion next year and still maintain its credit rating. So
And how much does the overall list of construction projects add up to?
yeah, that I don't know.
I think the proposed was like 1.9 from amendments and everything all piled
Yeah.
in.
1.1 billion basically, or one
1.9.
9.
Almost 2 billion.
almost 2 billion. Okay. All right. So even if they did it, if they maxed out the bond, they'd only do half of them this year.
Right. Well, you wouldn't, like we were saying earlier, specifically the timeline, as
Yeah.
construction moves forward, certain funds wouldn't need to be allocated until the second year of the biennium.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are probably 2 and 3 year construction projects if you throw all together. So yeah, 1.08 billion in 24 and another 1 billion in 25. They can borrow.
And is that, Greg, is that factoring in if the new tax structure?
That's to maintain their credit rating.
Correct, okay, it's based on that ratio, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. All right, any other comments on the General Assembly, the budget, or?
I've
the
been
next
thinking
step?
as you all are speaking, I apologize for my lateness today. One of the things that strikes me is that there is a strong push for universities to be more efficient. We keep hearing this. The General Assembly, like you were saying, Joe, the construction at universities has been cut dramatically, but at the same time, there are lots and lots of pushes coming from different offices, coming from within the universities themselves, but largely external pressure to become much more efficient and to think about using resources in innovative ways. And I'm wondering if one of the ways to promote the relevance of the Waynesboro Museum would be to actually get some letters from university presidents in which they could speak to how this museum can help bring to fruition some of the ideas that are currently in the ether. Just the whole idea of community engagement, education, student opportunity, but also providing a place where students, say in the College of Business, could actually study how something like this affects a community. It goes beyond just thinking about the natural resources or the cultural resource content of the museum itself. When you think about what universities bring to these kinds of projects, it's much greater than just the content of the exhibits. And there is a lot of opportunity out there. And it feels like that might be a card to play in these discussions.
So, Carol, would the tact be looking ahead? I mean, we have to come up with a mechanism to get to the letter being written and signed.
Sure.
But would the tact be to have letter or a copy of a letter go directly to people? Or is that something that we keep in our files, and every time any of us, board members, staff, whoever, are meeting with the players in this big game, that we hand them that letter? This shows you that the universities really support this, and it helps them become more efficient, right? What do you have an idea, or should we just kind of keep an open mind to that at this moment?
Well, that's a good question, Joe. And I think partly, just as you read the tea leaves and figure out the best way to
Right.
do it. I just know that some of the university presidents hold great sway in the General Assembly. JMU kind of had its day with Ron Carrier. He's not around anymore. But other universities do. Certainly JMU has a presence in the General Assembly. But they know people. They have networks. And
Yeah.
so it just feels like that is an opportunity that we could perhaps tie into.
Okay, let me talk with you offline. I want to
Sure.
digest that, and then maybe me, you, Tom. Do we have anybody else readily available from another university?
Sure, there are a couple of people I can think of from
Okay,
other
cool.
universities who might join.
Yeah, if we can kind of maybe come up with a brief discussion of strategy moving forward to, secure the letters. We already have the relationship with the JMU president,
Right,
with
right.
our MOU.
Yeah.
Right, so that's an advantage. But if we were
Absolutely.
to, say UVA or Tech or VCU or Bridgewater or something,
But I mean, even that in itself is a very interesting model. And it ties right into this idea of how state resources are being used. So just the example of JMU kind of leading the project management on this. It's one of those cross-agency sorts of things that government officials really like to see.
Okay.
And Joe, once you've got a consensus from the university presidents, that's a bullet point on that overall value proposition. Virginia University presidents, find this as blah, 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 whatever it comes out to be. But, that's one of those, objective return on investment kind of statements with teeth behind it.
Right.
Okay. I guess we can move into the community piece, Joe.
Yeah, I've mentioned a few of these things, and
Yeah.
the others are review. We do have scheduled some work time up at the trailer to prepare for Riverfest. We're also going to set things up as best as we can. We've kind of been going back and forth in terms of logistics to set things up as best as we can to have a volunteer crew utilize the trailer during farmers market hours. So we have some logistics to overcome there, but they're achievable. So we'll continue to keep everyone up to speed on that. The only other thing,
Just a note that the Riverfest is the 27th.
Yep. Is that true?
All right, yep.
Of April?
29th is a Monday.
I've been saying 29th for a while. My apologies.
That's all right.
All right. We'll still be done by then. All right.
Joe, when do you think the wrap?
That was a test for us non-Waynesboro people, Greg, huh?
Well done, Mark. Well done.
Okay.
Joe, when is the wrap going to be completed?
So I followed up with the designer. They're anticipating by next Friday, and that was partly based on the weather. So assuming no odd cold snaps.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it was really we pushed them to get the work done. They got done in less than good weather for that kind of work, and they did
Got it.
So hopefully with this El Nino driven early spring, so to speak, we can take advantage of that. So far so good. The only other thing I have, Mark, is the lecture series. I believe there is a lecture tonight, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there is. No, not tonight. Are you talking about?
It's next week.
Yeah, you mean up here or down there?
No, the one that's up at the Wayne Theater.
Yeah, it's next week. Yeah.
Next week, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll be missing that one. Tom knows about that, as I will be traveling to Waynesboro and Charlottesville Thursday and Friday that week. So otherwise, we're continuing on with our mission. The last thing, just unofficially, that I'll bring up is we are in some preliminary discussions with Dominion. They would like to fund a a project with the theme of connecting VMNH more strongly with the community. So what we floated by them was some interpretive embellishments of the Waynesboro Greenway regarding biology, ecology, culture,
Nice.
and
Yeah.
so forth. And we also pitched to them, but this is really preliminary, potentially like a ADA fishing / wildlife observation platform on the Greenway right in the vicinity of our lot, full well recognizing that Waynesboro does establish that that shelter for performances and so.
But you know, there already is a platform, right? Right there off of on the other, right there on the river,
Right.
off the shelter. Yeah.
Yeah, off to the south of Main Street, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, just south of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about putting up another one maybe to coincide with the newest part of the Greenway, you know,
Oh,
so.
down the other, all right, further upstream, downstream rather. Yeah.
Downstream, yes. And so I have a message off to Dwayne Jones, and so I want to get his input. So that was just kind of, you know, a 30,000 foot view that we gave them that we would like to connect more with the Greenway in a physical fashion and
Yeah.
use the community's access to the water, to the wildlife, to knowledge. And they bought into that because we had talked to them about the trailer. They didn't want to have anything to do with that. We've moved to this kind of connection to the Greenway. They did like that. So that's why we're going to have, hopefully soon here, a meeting with Dwayne to pick his brains and see what happens. So fingers crossed. They have 2 funding cycles, one in April and then one 6 months later.
Yeah, fall,
Okay.
yeah, right.
In the fall. So, and the idea, I don't think this would be too big of a push for the museum, because if we get the money, then we can rely upon our content experts to develop any content that's necessary. And then hopefully we can then transfer funds over to Parks and Rec to use their resources to do the actual install and then farm out the manufacturing.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
anyway, that's going. We're curious to see as to where that goes, but it would be nice to maintain that relationship with Dominion. And Mark, that's it from my end.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for discussion? If not,
Do not.
great. So our next meeting is 1 day away from being April Fools. So on the 2nd of April, and we'll see you all between now and then in some way, I hope. And hopefully everyone at Riverfest at the end of April. So thanks to everybody. As a motion to adjourn there. Yep. Thank you, Maggie.
Maggie?
Second. Okay. We're ready to go. We're adjourned. Thank